From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
Anyway, we all have some kind of belief system or concept about the experience of death, or what death is, what happens, where we go, et cetera, et cetera. And many of us have been conditioned to various belief systems about the experience of death and what it is and where we go. And we've settled into some of that conditioning. And sometimes when we settle into something and grab hold of an idea or concept about something, an openness to other possibilities goes away. And so we have sometimes been told through our early upbringing in religion and what have you, things about life, things about death, about a heaven, about a hell, about various beliefs, about doctrine, about dogma, and they become sometimes a rigid perception for us. So some are really uncomfortable with rethinking things or going outside of the boundaries of that. I don't believe that's the case for Unity people here. We really have an openness to explore and consider things. And we don't decide for you. We offer ideas of what is there that masters and mystics and teachers and, of course, Jesus Christ taught. And so many are ready for what might be new and a new landscape of truth, if you will, or what is the latest at least. So I just invite anyone, wherever you might be on your path, to kind of check inside yourself to see if you are able to give yourself total permission to kind of explore or to be open, to see whether or not there's any kind of restriction, there's any loyalty to something. No, I believe it's this way, kind of thing. And that's okay, but it's just to be aware of that, I think. So most people believe they will go on beyond death of the body. But how it is and where is it, what is it, what will we do there, that can vary, and people don't necessarily know that. So where do we find the answers? Where do we go to find the answers? Well, there are things that have been written. There are spiritual texts and what have you. There's some references to these things in the Bible, not a lot in terms of what's on the other side. There are also what is called mediums, and who are able to communicate with those who are beyond the veil. And some are legitimate. We have James Van Praagh that visits here, and very spiritual guy. And so there are some charlatans in anything, but there is also some reality and truth to the fact that we never die, and that spirits continue on, and that you can communicate. And some may not want to go there or believe that, and that's okay also. So that's one avenue of understanding what might be beyond the veil. There is something called Spiritism, which has a bit to do with this as well. And it's somewhat limited in terms of people's awareness of that. I've studied some of that and gotten some value from some of that as well. But one place that I want to go with us in this series that seems to have a lot of valid answers and has, I think, some real meaningful truths and ideas that are very helpful is in the area of near-death experiences. Near-death experiences. Now, one person who I will talk about later in this series has taken it upon themselves to do a lot of research into this area. And this person has actually read and studied over 2,500 written reports of individuals who have had these kinds of experiences. And so there's some consistency, and some of you have familiarity with these things and you've been exposed to it. Some of you know even as far back as 1975 when Dr. Raymond Moody came out with his book, Life After Life. I mean, that was all about near-death experiences. That was 40 years ago, and it was for many a person shocking and intriguing, but it revealed, again, a repetition of facts and experiences that people were having that were undeniable. But it was like people came out of the closet to share this, because oftentimes people were told when they had these experiences, you ought not share that with anyone because people will think you're crazy. And that's sad. But anyway, So they all seem to report the knowledge gained was like a remembering of things that they already knew at some deep soul level. So many or most speak about a white light, often a tunnel, presence of a profound love coming at them, communication with other deceased beings, often relatives, all done telepathically, not something you hear, but there's a communication at another level that takes place. Some, as I say, have tried to share their experience with others and were told they shouldn't tell anyone. Some were told that it's just a dream, you know. Some were told that, well, it was medications that caused hallucinations. But I think today many more people are open to listening and learning, including the medical community is much more open and receptive to this. There's been just so many experiences and a consistency, so it's interesting. And so in my research of near-death experiences and studying others' research, I have personally really been powerfully touched by the messages, the consistency of what is said, and the powerful way in which it is conveyed and communicated, and the difficulty they find in expressing and finding words to communicate what their experience has been. And it's to the point where some of these truths and ideas and messages simply cannot be ignored. They have an impact on the lives that we're living here and now. They have meaning in our world, and so help can come from many places, I believe, and it can help us gain a better understanding of how it is that we're to live in this life, how it is that we have gained greater clarity on our purpose, what this is about. They come back with a tremendous shift in their life. They are different, and if you've read any of these, that's consistent. And we'll talk about some of that. So there's a wealth of valuable insight, I think, offered by those who have stepped beyond the veil and come back. And, you know, many report the truths that they were given and discovered on that experience that resonate with really what masters and mystics and spiritual teachers down through time have tried to convey also. So there's a connection there, and of course that includes Jesus Christ. And so I think this is a valuable resource. So clarity is brought to what happens at death. Our purpose it often is one of the things that we gain clarity on from these individuals, a sense of your identity, who your true identity is, that there was like a whole clarity around who I am and what my role is, and many of us are struggling with that. There's a sense of healing that takes place oftentimes, not always. There is a sense of how much of our life is about illusions and explaining that, the importance of love, the importance of eliminating fear, and the importance of oneness and connectedness, and on. There's much more. So we're going to cover some of these things, and today I want to focus on a couple of these and then tell you about one particular person's near-death experience, and that was very powerful. It was put into a book form, and some of you are familiar with it, I know, may have read, and I apologize if it's too familiar to you, but it's worth going over again. But the book is called Dying to Be Me. Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani. And in a nutshell, Anita was in a coma, and it was the result of a 4-year bout with cancer. Her organs had shut down. She was given only hours to live, had a near-death experience from which she returned to report what life on the other side looks like and feels like. And her history is especially meaningful also in you know, not just her history, but kind of her story, because her story that she tells addresses why you are here. She had gained a renewed sense of truly who you are, how you can transcend fear, all of these things. And she was healed, and a tremendous healing story. And she emphasizes, and this is important, I think, that you get, that you do not need to have a near-death experience to heal. One of her intentions was to make clear how various emotional and psychological triggers can actually contribute to our becoming ill, and it's mainly fear. And in this story, you'll kind of get that. And she said that she was not interested in creating a one-size-fits-all kind of dogma. In other words, there's so many variables in every person's life and situation and what have you that you can't just do a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So just to tell you a little bit about her story, because there are many things that factor into the experiences that come up in our life. And she tells about how confused she was growing up, and that she was immersed in 3 different cultures and languages, and she was East Indian, so her family were from India, and they spoke the native Sindhi language, and they practiced the Hindu religion. And so however, she grew up in Hong Kong, and where they spoke Cantonese. And her parents sent her to British schools where she was having to speak and learn English. She also had her parents had for her a Chinese nanny who she got close to. So she was just flooded with all these different ideas and concepts and views and religious perspectives and so forth and values. And you would think that would be helpful to have that broad, but it was confusing to her as a child, at least in those years leading up to when she was about 7 or 8. And so as a young girl, she overheard a conversation that her mother was having with another Indian lady, and heard her mother say, yes, girls are a problem over boys. Having girls are more of a problem than a boy, especially when they grow up, is what she heard her mother say. You have to make sure that they don't get spoiled or they won't get a good husband. Because they were still arranged marriages, that was their tradition. And also the amount of dowry keeps going up every year. So there was this sense of her being a girl, her being more of a problem. That stuck with her. She never wanted to be, and this was like a fear she had, was to avoid being a problem to her parents, having heard that. I'm a girl, so I must be a problem. I don't want to be that. So that was carried through. There was this mixture of East and West that she had to deal with. She believed in karma and grew up believing in karma and reincarnation. Her early childhood began in a Catholic school run by nuns. By age 7, the cultural and religious differences were just having an impact and confusing her. One classmate who was named Joseph was saying, how come you don't go to church on Sundays? And she answered, because we're Hindu. And Joseph says, well, you better tell your parents to take you to church on Sundays, otherwise you won't get to heaven when you die. And so that frightened her, because this little girl, Anita, was full of fears. And she took it to her mother, and her mother said, well, a religion is not truth. It's just a path. There are different paths to truth. But still, her fears were of not conforming to what her peers around her were saying. What if they're right? And what if God comes to me? In the night, I haven't been baptized. And so that was drilled in her that you got to be baptized. And she stopped sleeping. She started fighting sleep. And her parents realized all these fears that were working on their little 7-year-old girl. And they then transferred her to even another school that was a more secular school. And then she got into her teens, and she was, others were going out with boys, but that was frowned upon in her culture, so she never felt like she belonged. Her parents were starting to arrange for a marriage, so now, because she was, graduating from high school, but she had by that time become westernized, living in Hong Kong, and she wanted to go to college. She wanted to backpack in Europe. She wanted to experience and see the world and different things, and marriage was going to be a conflict for that. And so that would end her chances. So she had this conflict going on, and she finally agreed to a match they made with another Indian boy, and got engaged. And then right up to the last minute, she backed out, realizing that she could never be, for him or for his parents, the person that they wanted her to be, because they were very strong in a lot of the cultural things that she had kind of moved out of. And so she felt a failure. She felt she let him down. She let his parents down. She let her parents all down. What's wrong with me? The Hindu community there were sad with her, angry, disappointed in her. She felt all that. So she meets her soulmate, a guy named Danny. And he was also from her culture, but he was more progressive also, and more westernized. They were of like mind. They fell in love. It was her soulmate. They got married. And her father died in his sleep 2 months after Danny had proposed. A bit later, they decide to adopt a child rather than have their own child. Again, negative responses come at them from their community. Again, feelings of not measuring up. All this going on. Her best friend gets diagnosed. Her best friend in the world gets diagnosed with cancer. A few months later, Danny, her husband's brother-in-law, is diagnosed with cancer. And so Anita goes into fear, and she begins to study and research everything she can find about cancer. And the more she finds and reads, the more afraid she becomes. She starts to believe that everything causes cancer. Pesticides, microwaves, preservatives, everything. She becomes so paranoid with this. And so less than a year after her friend Soni's diagnosis, Anita goes into the doctor, get a checkup, and they find that there's a lump at the base of Anita's neck. And she's diagnosed with stage 2 lymphoma cancer, her greatest fear. So what does she do? She starts researching every remedy that exists, becomes a vegetarian, goes into holistic and Eastern healing systems. I could go a long list of all the things that she said she tried. Went to India for several months. She had kind of a surge, sort of a comeback. When she came back from India, all the people around doubted that she could really be healing. It got to her mind again. She declined eventually 3 months, a very short time, and she was told she had no more than 3 months to live. So was in a wheelchair, oxygen tank there, lost weight, a skeleton of herself. Finally, she reached the place where she was ready to go and slipped into a coma. Danny rushed her to the hospital there in Hong Kong. Oncologist there, when they got to the hospital, said, her heart is beating, but she's not there. It's too late to save her, the condition she was in. And this is where she had her near-death experience. It began. And so she wondered, who is this doctor talking about? It's too late to save her. And she said, I wasn't using my 5 biological senses, yet was keenly taking in all that was said, all that was happening. And she thought, why is Danny, my husband, and my mother crying? I'm fine. I've never felt better. And she said, I was more acutely aware than I've ever been in a normal state. It was like another completely different perception kicked in. I was slowly merging with it all. So there's a sense of becoming one with everything. And in fact, she says there is the doctor speaking to her husband, Danny. There's nothing we can do for your wife. Her organs have already shut down. She has tumors the size of lemons throughout her lymphatic system. Her brain and lungs are filled with fluid. Her skin has developed lesions that are weeping with toxins. And Anita said, at this point, she was continuing to expand to fill every space until there was no separation between her and everything. She said, I became everything. I became everyone. I could feel my husband's fear. I began to expand further onward, away from the physical surroundings and deeper into another realm. She called it superb, glorious, unconditional love surrounded me. It felt as though I had awakened my soul, finally realizing its true magnificence. And this is a big part that she hit on, is finding this part of herself that she suddenly stepped into, that she got to own and brought back actually after this near-death experience, is the depth and the wonder of her sheer magnificence as a child of God, and swept away all the other stuff that gets in the way. And she says, this magnificence is love, is joy, ecstasy, awe, poured into me, through me, engulfed me. Quite an experience. She became aware of her father, who had passed on 10 years prior to this near-death experience. She says, Dad, you're here? Yes, I'm here, darling, and I've always been here for you and the whole family. He communicated to her telepathically. Then her best friend, Sony, who had died 3 years prior, her presence came. And then there were others, beings that she didn't recognize but knew were there loving her through this. And she said, then a clarity came, a clarity that was amazing. She said, I finally understand. I know why I have cancer. Why do I suddenly understand all this? And then she had this realization of God. And you need to understand, there's an aspect of God that is unknowable and remains a mystery. Nobody sees God, except that God is knowable through manifest forms, manifesting as a light. People see a light, manifest as a presence, manifests as miracles happening, manifests sometimes in individuals as avatars carrying forth that truth, and also as a state of being. And that's what she experienced. She said she realized that God is a state of being. And she said, I was that state of being. You hear masters and mystics talk about you actually become God, and that's really hard for us to grasp what that is. But she called it experiencing this dimension of God that is a state of being, and I was that. And that was the best way she could convey it. She said, every single encounter was woven to create the fabric of my life. Everything worked together to create so many variables that enter into creating your life. She said, here I'm without my body, race, color, religion, beliefs, culture. Then what am I? Who am I? I haven't ever been this huge, this powerful, all-encompassing. I felt eternal, as if I'd always existed and always would. I was filled with the knowledge that I was simply magnificent. It's like, this is how God holds you to be. This is what you were created to be. This is your truth. Very powerful to be with that, for us to be with that, to get from beyond the veil these ideas and have them get absorbed to some extent, and then begin to live ourselves from a dimension of that. She said, I became aware we're all connected. Everything in the universe. We're all one. And we affect the whole, meaning we don't realize how much we affect each other in so many ways. I understood that the cancer was not some punishment, not negative karma. My many, many fears had manifested as disease. I discovered, since I'd realized who I really was and understood the magnificence of my true self, if I chose to go back to life, my body would heal rapidly, not in months or weeks, but in days. It was then I understood that my body is only a reflection of my internal state. And she was getting that. If you stand in that magnificence has to come into expression. And therefore, even time is shortened. She got that on that side. I realized I had a purpose yet to fulfill that was unfolding and involved helping lots of people. And it had to do with this experience, of which she recalled a lot, and to share it. And she said, the only purpose of life is to be ourself, live our truth, and be love. About 30 hours after entering the coma, her eyes flickered. Her husband shouts, she's back! A coma she had been in for 30 hours. Within 2 days of coming out of the coma, her organs were back functioning. Her tumors were visibly shrunk within 3 days. Swelling of glands, too. About 6 days after coming out of some time in the ICU, tests came back from her bone marrow biopsy. They couldn't find any cancer. The doctors were dumbfounded. This is a problem, they said. There's something wrong here. We have to figure out a dosage, and there's nothing to formulate how much or how bad to formulate the dosage. One doctor said, that's not possible. It can't just disappear so quickly like that. Another doctor said, how is it possible for several billion cancer cells to leave her body so quickly in just days? the reduction of tumors by 70% in just days, the healing of lesions on her skin that they were going to have to do reconstructive surgery, healed. Anita says, here's what clicked the switch. I want to clarify, my healing wasn't a shift in state of mind or beliefs, but from finally allowing my true spirit to shine through. The state I was in was beyond the mind. Remember, we talk about the mind we need to learn to use, or it will use us. And that's what awareness is. And that's what we teach here. So the state I was in was beyond the mind, and I healed because my damaging thoughts were out of the way completely. She was no longer her culture, her race, her this, her that. She was just her, a child of God. I was not in a state of thinking, but in a state of being. I was pure consciousness and what I call magnificence. And this state of oneness transcends duality. I was able to get in touch with who I truly am, the part of me that's eternal, that's infinite, that encompasses the whole. My near-death experience was a state of pure awareness, a complete suspension of all previously held doctrine, dogma, and ideas. She's not necessarily mean just throwing away religion. She's just saying concepts, all the concepts that had stood in the way, that were negative and what have you, frightening. She said, my dear, she said, this suspension allowed my body to reset itself. Needing to operate out of concrete beliefs limits my experiences. In other words, when we get stuck in the concrete of a belief, as opposed to the flexibility of moving beyond and stretching and broadening it, being in that concrete beliefs, my experience, needing to operate out of concrete beliefs limits my experiences because it keeps me within the realm of only what I know, and my knowledge is limited. And I restrict myself to only what I'm able to conceive. I'm holding back my potential and what I allow into my life. However, if I can accept that my understanding is incomplete, and if I'm able to be comfortable with uncertainty, this opens me up to the realm of infinite possibilities. I'm at my strongest when I'm able to let go and leave myself open to all possibilities. And so we will get into more possibilities next week. We'll go further. We will learn more of what is to be told and revealed from beyond the veil. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.